It's Friday, July 25th, 2025. Trump visits Powell, a legend passes on, and Ask Her Tell Me Anything next on the AM Update. Thanks for spending another most of the week with me as we get back into the full swing of things on the AM Update. As always, I don't feel like I've earned it this time around, but if you have any extra time, go give me a 5-star review on the podcast platform of your choice. Even if you've already done that, somehow, some way, I'm sure that this actually helps me somehow, whether that's iTunes or Spotify. An increasing number of people listening on Spotify. I'd like to see that. First, as always, on a Friday edition, we've got a Friday 5-pack. President Trump visited the Federal Reserve building yesterday, which is being renovated at a really high price tag. Jerome Powell is actually there to meet with the president as they stood side by side when Trump started talking about that aforementioned high price tag.
So we're taking a look, and it looks like it's about $3.1 billion. It went up a little bit, or a lot. So the 2.7 is now 3.1.
So I want to pause it right there. I wish you could see this. When Trump said it looks like it's $3.1 billion, Powell looked like a deer in the headlights, started shaking his head, no, and kept shaking his head.
I'm not aware of that.
Yeah, it just came out.
Yeah, I haven't heard that from anybody at the Fed.
Yeah, it just came out.
So Trump takes a piece of paper out of his breast pocket.
Our notes had it about 3.1 as well.
3.1,
3.2.
This came from us?
Yes. I don't know who does that.
And there's
You're
Powell.
including the Martin renovation. You just added
our entire capital.
Yeah, you just added in a third building. Is what that is. That's a third building.
Well,
including
no,
the
but
Martin building.
it's a building that's being built.
No, it was built 5 years ago. We finished Martin 5 years ago.
It's part of the overall work.
But it's not new.
So we're going to take a look.
Jerome Powell, Fed Reserve Chair, looks like he wants to quit life in that exchange. Oh, no, you're just adding in a third building. We've completed that 5 years ago. And Trump is like, yeah, it's part of the overall project, $3.2 billion for the Federal Reserve. Here's California Governor Gavin Newsom being interviewed again by, don't know who this is, actually. Tried to look into it, and there's absolutely no sourcing for this. But he basically admits that he was involved in the coup to oust Biden, I should say, back about a year ago this week.
There was a lot of talk, rhetoric, that there was an internal desire to overthrow him around that time, because you could see on TV he was struggling in the polls and Donald Trump was reveling in it. And then I heard this narrative coming up that, Nancy Pelosi and the Democratic Party were having private conversations and telling him to step down and forcing him out.
Yeah.
All cards on the table, 100% truth. Is there any truth in that?
Yeah. No, a lot of that was happening. I mean, a lot of people were, there was a phone tree that lit up that night. There was a text tree, phone tree, email, just blew up.
Saying?
People were in panic. Total, full-fledged panic.
California Governor Gavin Newsom admitting to a podcast host who will remain unidentified he was indeed part of the coup to oust Biden from office. Vice President J.D. Vance spoke at the All In podcast, or the Hill and Valley Forum, sponsored by the All In podcast. We've featured clips from them. David Sachs, that one dude whose name I can't pronounce. Anyway, here is J.D. Vance talking about Microsoft firing 9,000 Americans and then applying for a bunch of H-1B visas. Now, your views, or his views here, are not that much of a surprise. You wouldn't be surprised to hear what he's about to say from J.D. Vance, but keep in mind who his audience is, especially the hosts of that podcast. These are entrepreneurs, business owners, and investors who have probably, let's say, some nuanced views when it comes to H-1B.
A massive shortage in these jobs. And by the way, you see some big tech companies where they'll lay off 9,000 workers and then they'll apply for a bunch of overseas visas. And I sort of wonder, that doesn't totally make sense to me.
The math doesn't.
That displacement and that math worries me a bit. And what the president has said, he said very clearly, we want the very best and the brightest to make America their home. We want them to build great companies and so forth. But I don't want companies to fire 9,000 American workers and then to go and say, we can't find workers here in America. That's a bullshit story.
What did Microsoft say when you brought that up with Microsoft? Have you talked to them about it?
I have not. I just became aware of this a couple weeks ago. Somebody sent me an article about this, and they said, well, and it maybe was Microsoft.
It was Microsoft.
That fired, I think, 9,000 people. And then I was like, wait a second.
Record profits, record market cap.
but also saying they're desperate for workers. So I have not yet had that conversation with Microsoft. In my defense, I just found out.
So there's J.D. Vance just calling out Microsoft, and this is a true story. This unfolded a couple of weeks ago. Fired 9,000 American workers, and then applied for thousands of H-1B visas to hire much cheaper foreign workers. Let's go to The View now. Here's Joy Behar. I described her as the shrillest one on The View to someone the other day, and they said that's not very helpful. You're going to have to be more specific. But here she is yesterday on The View. Is The View about to get canceled?
And before we go on hiatus, we only have one more show after this. I'm allowed to say that, right?
Too late now.
So it doesn't really matter. Yeah.
Before we go, I wanted to tell people that the tide is turning. The tide is turning, and things are changing. I mean, the ultimate irony would be that Rupert Murdoch will take him down.
Yeah.
Fox News, who created the monster, will take him down.
So there's Joy Behar. It sounded like she wasn't supposed to say anything about The View going on hiatus. Now, this is not an uncommon thing in television. Sometimes shows like this, episodic shows, talk shows, will just go on hiatus, especially the big networks, who apparently have the workforce that needs breaks like that. But it does actually raise some eyebrows. I mean, Stephen Colbert this week, maybe The View now. It sounded like she wasn't supposed... Usually when shows go on hiatus, they'll just say, hey, we'll be back for a new season and X, Y, and Z. You know, they usually don't keep it hush-hush like it sounded like they were trying to do. But Stephen Colbert going goodbye. Now maybe The View in the same week. Somebody pointed out the other day, it's really interesting, the things that just randomly getting canceled once we started messing around with USAID funding. Isn't that interesting? And finally, I was never a big pro wrestling fan, but I do understand just how much of an icon Hulk Hogan is. Hulk Hogan, pro wrestling, he was an icon in pro wrestling, but he was really just a dominant cultural icon altogether. And he had what I believe was a genuine conversion to Christianity later on in his life. And here he is talking about finding Christ later in life.
At the end, the one guy I finally became friends with, which we did not get along at all, was Roddy Piper, and I got real close at the end.
Oh, yeah,
you know, right before he passed away, man. We were on the phone every day talking about Scripture, and he wanted to understand about accepting Christ as a Savior. Every day I was on him, brother. Every day. So we became very close.
Hey, I know, speaking of that, spirituality and your relationship with God is important to you. And I know that you were a Christian and been a Christian through your whole life, but I'm sure there's been like a reawakening of sorts. Like, when did that happen for you, and when did you really start that walk again with God?
Well, recently. I mean, I was saved when I was 14. I was playing guitar at a youth ranch. I was playing football, and a couple of football players say, hey, we go to this Christian youth ranch and we sing every week. So I went with them. And then, they said, oh, he can play guitar. So the next week I brought my guitar and ended up playing guitar for all the songs and stuff. And I accepted Christ as my Savior then, but it took a while for me to get it. But then, rock and roll music, wrestling, didn't follow the path for many years. And then with all the stuff that's happened in my life personally, all the crashing and burning and getting up and moving forward and starting over and crashing and burning again, and this mistake after that mistake, I just totally surrendered, man. And I said, you know what? I've fought harder than anybody. I've worked more longer hours than anybody. And I'm just so tired of being in the same empty back to zero space that I started going back to church every weekend and got baptized, totally surrendered. And now I just tell my big God about my little problems, and all these people that nip at my heels, brother, I just pray for them. I can't get involved with the drama because, I just let God fight those battles, man. I just let him take over, and no matter what type of drama comes at me, and it's always something, I just sit back and try as best as I can. And I'm not always good at it. But I try as best as I can just to remain still.
That's Hulk Hogan. What a great American. And you just hear it oozing out of his voice there, the real faith that he showed late in his life. passing away yesterday at the age of 72. Really cool conversion story from Hulk Hogan. And again, I wasn't a big wrestling fan, but he went beyond. Age of 71. Passed away at 71. You know, he was more than just a wrestling icon, just a totally a cultural icon, a dominant one at that. When we come back, it'll be another round of Ask or Tell Me Anything for the first time in about a month. That's coming up next. Back for one final segment this week on the AM Update. Ask or Tell Me Anything. You can ask me any question you want. Tell me any story you think needs covered on the AM Update. Let's begin with Johnny Bourbon. Any chance we see you as a Fox News contributor or on Gutfeld? Oh, that's funny. Good jokes, Johnny. You're funny. James Moon. Will AI data centers be the new COVID? I have no idea what you mean by that. AI data centers? I don't... It boggles the mind. I don't know what the connection there is. And maybe I should be thinking harder about this. I mean, COVID was a mass hysteria, panic. Some called it a plandemic. To varying degrees it was. But COVID, I don't think there are very many similarities. Now, the big concern that I'm starting to have about AI data centers is just how much electricity they use. Some have speculated. I don't think this is the main cause for it. But there was a major grid operator who just raised their electrical rates this summer astronomically. I think that just has mostly to do with the fact that Americans are very air conditioned, and it's been a very hot and humid summer so far. And I think it was somewhere out east. I saw this story. But in places like Iowa, there are already data centers. I'm not sure about AI data centers. I think, actually, no, I know for sure there are some AI data centers already in Iowa, where I live. And just cheap land, sweetheart deals from local governments, and access to abundant, not cheap, but lower than like a Chicago or Houston energy prices. So how that's going to impact the average person living in the United States, we're going to have to start generating a lot more energy. I appreciate the Trump administration's efforts so far via the EPA and the energy, the Department of Energy, to streamline the process of building new nuclear plants. I think that's going to be one of the big tickets in the future. I really do believe in nuclear power. It's not the cheapest form of power, but it is the clean. I think we should be burning coal if we can do it in a cleanish way. I think we should be burning, generating power via oil or whatever you have if we can do it in a fairly clean way. But in terms of, hey, this is the sweet spot of it's clean energy and it's very abundant, I think it's nuclear energy. It's not the cheapest energy, but it's the most abundant form of it. So that's my main concern with AI data centers. So answering a question you didn't really ask there. Bullfrog was here, and so was Speedwagon. Who was the fourth person in studio on Monday's show? You're talking about my day job. That was an engineer, because that was the first show in the new facility, and so that was one of the engineers who was helping me out while I was trying to talk on the air and troubleshoot at the same time. Captain says, is James Tellerico the personification of the sweater vest nicer than God pastor trope? I don't know who that is. James Tellerico. James Tellerico, Texas State Representative. Never heard of him. I guess he was on Rogan. He's a Democrat, and Joe Rogan told him he should run for president. Maybe I'll go back and listen to that. Brady says, will Obama be smart enough to keep quiet and lawyer up after this week's revelations? I don't know, Brady, but I will say, when was the last time that the Barack Obama cabal and Barack Obama himself actually issued a statement about anything that Trump said about him? When was the last, not just a tweet, not just a post on social media, but an actual official statement? It's been a while, but that happened this week. Brady also asked, do you feel like this current news cycle is drinking from a fire hose? Yes, I do. I was really not up to speed for about 5 days last week, and then trying to get back up to speed on the news earlier this week, that was a tall task. Alexander asks, will the Department of Justice's investigation include a warrant to search the Obama's residence at Martha's Vineyard and feature a revenge panty raid on Big Mike's dresser drawer? I believe we would be doing a boxer briefs raid. But yes, that needs to happen. Why not? Of course, that's what they did with Melania. Allegedly, the FBI did that 3 a.m. raid at Mar-a-Lago. Went through everything, including Melania's intimates. So, fair is fair. Shulva8 says, almost immediately after MacArthur died, a few people in my feed started sharing nonstop posts about how he enabled abuse among his congregation. Is there actually any there? Well, I don't think so. This is from Julie Roys, who's an independent investigator, who... I thought at the beginning of her work, I think one of her first stories was some financial indiscretions at Moody Bible Institute. And I thought, hey, maybe she's just doing some exposing here. And she reports in such a way as if there's no one around, around the subjects of my story that are actually keeping them accountable. So it's up to me to do that. And then basically this has turned to her entire career has it turned into, if you believe in complementarianism, and you believe husbands should actually lead. Basically, if you're not a feminist, if you're not a Christian feminist, which is feminist light, whatever that is, she's going to put you in her targets, right in her crosshairs. So she has discredited herself for quite a while. And so I would not take any of her reporting with very much, I don't know, good faith. So I'm going to say no, just because I think it's very obvious that John MacArthur finished well. And he's been so consistent behind the pulpit from what I've heard in his personal life. You heard that story of his personal trainer who started working with John MacArthur before he even knew who John MacArthur was, and stated after MacArthur passed away that once he figured out who MacArthur was, he was just blown away because the person he is behind the pulpit was the person he saw, who he didn't even know who he was. That was the person he saw and helped train. Very consistent personal life. Let's go now to CC Green Oak, who says, talk about how awful Real ID and stablecoin are. Y'all were completely right during COVID. How can you not talk about this? It's way worse than vax mandates. I think you're misconstruing what a stablecoin is. Stablecoin is something that's pegged to hard assets, or assets, I guess you could say, pegged to like the dollar. Pegged to, you can peg it to real estate. You can peg it to anything that's stable. So it avoids these massive fluctuations. That's the idea behind a stable coin. That's all it is. It's not some sort of central bank digital currency. Not necessarily. So I think you're misconstruing what that is. Real ID. I've seen a lot of misinformation about this as well. Real ID was implemented 20 years ago. Was passed 20 years ago. Okay? For the last 10 years, if you've been in an airport, you've seen signs saying, Real ID is coming, Real ID is coming. And now finally it just happens to get implemented during Trump's first 6 months. Do I like it? No. But if you're blaming this on Trump, you're just wrong. If you've been in an airport in the last 10 years, there have been signs every time I've gone saying, Real ID is coming, Real ID is coming, get ready, get the star on your driver's license. Okay, this thing was passed about 20 years ago, and it just took that long for it to be implemented. I don't like it, but don't act like this is a new thing. So that's it. That's it for Ask or Tell Me Anything. Sorry, I didn't mean to end the week on an angry note, but I've just seen a lot of people trying to lay this at Trump's feet, and it's just not accurate. It's just not true. There's enough things right now, especially to criticize parts of the Trump administration for. That is not, I don't think, one of them. That's going to do it for a Friday. Bella and I finally back again tomorrow for No Sucks Saturday, the long national nightmare of No Sucks Saturday-less Saturdays is over. We will be back at it again tomorrow. For everybody else, if you missed that, back at it again with regular programming on Monday morning.